Yo, Molo Sanbonani, hello, how's it? Good evening, goeienaand, and shalom to you, dear viewer, and welcome to Liberty and Friends, which comes to you, of course, every Sunday evening at 8 p.m. I am Sihle Ngobese, Big Daddy Liberty. Welcome to it, welcome to it. This is your Sunday evening news wrap of the week, and hopefully, as I always say, I'm gunning for that for that top carte blanche spot. Where carte blanche is an institution in this country. I hope that Liberty and Friends will become exactly that. Guys, welcome to it. If you're here right now, welcome, as I always say. And please hit that like button, whether you're watching on Facebook or on YouTube. And of course, share the link. Let's bring as many people on tonight as possible. I have a bumper show and indeed a very interesting guest panel. Without any more waffling in that regard, just one more quick reminder: you can support the work here at the Big Daddy Liberty Show by becoming a contributor. All of those details are in the descriptor of this video. So with that being said, shout out to all of you guys who are contributing to the show already. And yeah, I see you guys in the comment section. It's becoming a little lively. Guys, remember, hit that like button and share, please, this link. And let's get as many people as possible onto the show. Speaking about people getting onto the show, I have an interesting panel tonight. Let me introduce them progressively as they come on screen. I have, of course, with me Dumo Denga. There he is, coming onto the screen now. Dumo Denga, of course, is the host of the Manpatria podcast. Details of that are in the descriptor of the video as my light falls here. Dumo, good evening. Welcome. How are you doing?
Good evening, Sihle. And yeah, thanks for having me on tonight. I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent, brother. Good to have you with us. Another familiar face from the show. He's in one of the episodes buried somewhere as we talk about gun rights and gun ownership in the country is Tim Flack. Tim, welcome to the show, as I think you are now on screen. There you go.
Hey, Big Daddy, how's it going? Thanks for having me on the show.
Hey, man. Awesome, brother. Good to have you with us. And of course, another gun nut, someone who I am a good friend to and someone who really I look to on all things gun-related, gun rights, and he's doing some important lobby work in that regard. He's actually the host of the Paratus show. You can also check him out at Paratus.Info. That's Gideon Joubert. Gideon, brother man, good evening.
Good evening, Sish. Let me just unmute myself there. And good evening to Dumo and Tim and everyone in the comment section. Great to see you guys here tonight on the Sunday, and it's going to be a cracker, I think.
Yeah, damn straight. Excuse the pun there as the gunman. But with that being said, last but definitely not least, a guy who I've been on his show twice, and indeed on his platform, which I encourage you to check out. That's the Cliff Central platform, the host, of course, of So What Now, which is on ENCA, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. I may have butchered that, but I'll let him correct me if I'm wrong. Gareth Cliff, who's on the screen now. Gareth, hi.
How are you? Nice to see you, Sihle. Nice to see all of you. Thank you.
Fantastic, brother. Good to see you. Just give me a moment, fellas. Let me just quickly fix the layout of my screen. I'm getting feedback from one of you guys. So if you can just maybe check that out whilst I am doing this. This is much better.
All right. Is it good now? Are you happy?
Just a quick checking. Yeah, it's a little better.
Just by the way, the show on ENCA is at 8:30, so you were just a little early, but otherwise everything is spot on. Thank you, Sihle, for that.
There we go. Absolutely, guys. Fantastic. Welcome to it. I want us to hop straight into it. You know, on this show, we effectively wrap up the news week that was and ask a few interesting questions that maybe missed in the day-to-day analysis from the mainstream media and really the commentariat that is often paraded before us. And for me, there's a few issues this week which really, that piqued my interest in terms of them exemplifying the broad direction of where this country is going, generally speaking. I'm going to begin top of mind when it comes to the political elites in this country and who else exemplifies it, but none other than one Ace Magashule, who appeared in the Bloemfontein court again on Friday. Guys, again, he's facing charges of, amongst other things, money laundering, corruption. This is, of course, relating to, if I can just quickly get to my notes here, this is, of course, relating to the over more than 70 counts of basically fraud, corruption, and money laundering that he's facing. That's him and 15 of his co-accused, which, and this is the kicker, includes, of course, state officials, as is always the case when it comes to the political elite, and, of course, their wonderful friends who we've broadly come to call the tenderpreneurs. These individuals before the court right now, the NPA itself, confident it has a solid case against this man. This is, of course, related to the asbestos saga. Gareth, I'm going to begin with you because I'm hoping you may have kept an eye on this case. But it does speak to the broader trend, doesn't it, of politicians seemingly jumping between parliament and the courts and not even to their constituents.
Well, they don't care about their constituents. I think everybody on this discussion this evening will probably be of the same opinion. I hope that it's not boring for me to say so. But I don't think someone like Ace Magashule has ever thought about his constituency. The Free State was just, it happened to be a convenient place for him to do business. And he is, whether you like him or not, he's a very successful, if crooked, businessman. He's been setting himself up and his family and his cronies for a very long time. And I think he's succeeded at it and would have continued to succeed at it as long as Jacob Zuma was around. Unfortunately, we kind of put a spanner in the works for him. And he then had to, eventually get out as Premier of the Free State, where he was very nicely ensconced. I don't think there's a thing that went on in the Free State that he didn't have a finger in terms of taking a slice of the pie. And I think since he's become Secretary General, he's probably found it quite boring because he can't actually get as involved in every tender as he used to when he was Premier. So I think his business has taken a bit of a blow. I mean, our business, because it's our money that gets funneled this way. So I'm a little disappointed. I wonder if that's going to affect Tito's budget speech because, I'm sure that Ace is a very, very honest taxpayer. And I'm sure that all the money that he was making, he was paying more than his fair share of tax back, as a good socialist should. And maybe this will affect the fact that Tito has to rearrange his budget come next week.
Absolutely. Gareth, I'm getting a little bit of a crackling in your mic, but you made an important point. I'm going to pass it on to Dumo. Dumo, there's the other spectacle, wasn't there, on Friday during the court appearance of Ace Magashule, which is the throngs of supporters that they bring to these events. And they almost become it looks like a David Koresh is leading people, or, Shamriko or some other cult of nature, of sorts, outside this case. The praise and worship, Dumo, of political elites in this country, it gets a little sickening, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is problematic because it's quite clear that Ace has got a lot of issues and, been involved in corruption and so forth. But obviously there are allegations, but he still has a lot of support, and these people will support him blindly. And it kind of makes you wonder, really, what will it take for people to actually realize that, hey, maybe perhaps Ace is not the best person to follow. And we've seen it even last week with Zuma as well. He's got scores of supporters. Guys were outside of his house. MK vets were chilling there saying that you need to get through me before you get to Zuma and everything like that. And even Malema went to visit him because he was actually out of the news cycle. So that's the reality. Unfortunately, this is what you'll get. You'll get leaders, bad ones, and they have supporters as well. And it's up to us to really inform people that, maybe it's not the best thing to follow this type of leader, and let's just follow the facts.
Absolutely. Gideon, I must come to you on this one because we've had this conversation before, just in our chatting, which is, in terms of answering the question of what would be the ideal society, it can't be one where the politicians have this amount of power, where they can corrupt, for instance, what should be open markets where everybody can operate. But instead, you have a situation, a status quo in this country where politicians like Ace, who certain business people who are connected to the political elite see him as their ace up the sleeve. And it's a very sort of corrupt network of tenderpreneurs, politicians, and and effectively state officials. Your thoughts on that and how we see this play out now in a case like Ace?
Well, Zuma has been wonderful examples and practical living illustrations of how broken our institutions are in this country. The fact that the criminal justice system is a parody. I mean, we cannot prosecute a connected individual of which the evidence is so damning and stacked so high. I need oxygen to get to the top of the pile. And just nothing happens to these people. I mean, the Stalingrad defense, as much as supposed legal experts poo-poo it, has proven gloriously effective. Frere Jacques has taken the wheels out from underneath the police, from SARS, underneath from the MPA, while he was president. And now that he is no longer president, not only do I think do the resources not exist to successfully prosecute him or anyone connected to him, but the intellectual capacity and the skills are also not there. So I stand by my thing that Jacob Zuma might be the best thing for this country right now, in the sense of a very rude and horrible wake-up call for people to say, no one is coming to save you. The system is broken. It's up to you to invest in your own resilience, take responsibility for your community, for yourself, for your family, and invest in that resilience and do what is needed to actually survive and thrive in this post-Zuma society. But that's also not correct, because Zuma isn't the fundamental problem with ANC. The ANC is the fundamental problem of the ANC.
Absolutely. And again, another fundamental problem here is Tim, and I want to throw this one to you because it will touch into the later conversation we have around, for example, the issue of the South African police services. But what I'm actually trying to pine at here is the notion of the absolute erosion of state institutions that are meant to deliver on what is and what are, if you're a libertarian, for example, the role of government. The administration of justice, for example, is a fundamental role of government. And you have a situation here where the NPA, openly says, we're very confident that we have a solid case against Ace Magashule. But perhaps if you're an ordinary citizen, you're wondering, but what about the many other cases where clearly things are falling by the wayside, Tim?
Well, I mean, it's quite funny. The NPA always comes up with these stories that they've got a solid case and stuff like that. When I know for a fact, in instances like this, when it comes to financial related crimes, they do not have the capacity. They don't have the Hawks don't have forensic auditors to be able to investigate these crimes, and I know this for a fact. If you put an official request to the Hawks or to the NPA and ask them, do they have a forensic auditor that sits down and looks at the numbers that can prove this nonsense, they'll tell you they don't have one, because I know for a fact he left a couple of years ago.
And that's a great indictment again, which again, Gareth, I can see you shaking your head, and I want to come to you on this point, because it's been the actual intent of the political elite. And again, I use the word political elite broadly, the ANC in particular, with the notion of cater deployment. It's gutting the state institutions, capturing them in order to have these sort of situations where the state can't respond on what is and should be their role.
Well, I suppose this is the inherent contradiction in everything to do with the ANC, and it shows you that, and maybe this is a relief to me in some way, deep in their most important integrity, they're actually rabid capitalists. They protest and pretend that they're socialists, but actually they're the greediest kind of capitalists in the ANC. And I think that might just be our saving grace. I mean, I've had debates over and over with people about whether or not Jacob Zuma was the worst person, or whether what we've got now and what we saw at the beginning of lockdown, when we had this draconian kind of all-controlling, all-consuming idea of total control, totalitarian control. I wondered whether that was maybe much, much worse than Jacob Zuma in some ways, because at least he let the majority of South Africans get on with their business. The new administration seems to be intent on destroying and getting in the way of people doing business. And they'll use the excuse that it was because of a pandemic, but we all know that it was also an opportunity that provided itself. And, you never let a good crisis go to waste. I've agreed with all of the other panelists so far about absolutely everything they've said. I find it really interesting that suddenly Jacob Zuma has chosen this time to make himself make us aware of him again, and he's been
That's
quiet
right.
time. There's no mistake in that. The man is extraordinarily strategic. You underestimate him at your peril, and he calls on the people he needs to call on, and proves that those ties are as strong as ever when he does call on them. That he can, with a click of his fingers, summon the lapdog Julius Malema back into his arms, despite all the protesting, and we saw all the action in Parliament for years of, shut up, pay back the money. It was all theatre. This is all performance art. And when it comes to where the money is, what I found deeply troubling, and Tim is quite right, there are no forensic auditors in the organs of state that have been denuded by these thieves, because that suits them. It works better for them. And I wouldn't be surprised at all kinds of other underhanded tactics that we're not even aware of, that are going on silently, the Bell Pottinger type things that are happening in the shadows. Remember, we only found out about the Guptas because they landed at that Air Force base. We would probably still be in the dark now if it wasn't for that. That's a scary thought, because what you don't know may be even worse than the things that we do know.
Absolutely. And Dumo, sorry, man, I don't mean to belabor this particular point, but I mean, it speaks to such broader implications for the criminal justice system. And you've been raising this a lot. You often make fun of them, I'm a K-Taz, as you often mockingly refer to them. But this isn't happenstance. This isn't all just a series of, sort of coincidences. They know exactly what they're doing, aren't they?
Right. They do know exactly what they're doing. The reality is that a lot of South Africans really take the politicians' words seriously, and they think that, and they believe them very easily. And I think that one thing that we also need to be very cognizant of is just that we need to understand what these guys are doing. And that seems to be the question that's not being answered by mainstream media. And unfortunately, because, it hasn't been answered, it's not been asked, many South Africans are naive. And now we're starting to see really the ANC ramp up its NDR policies and stuff like that. You heard Ramaphosa talking about land reform, but obviously land reform is a euphemism for expropriation of property without compensation. And then he tries to phrase it in such a way to make it sound like as if land reform is the best thing ever. And many South Africans are like, yeah, this is great. Yeah, land reform is good. But when you look at the fine print, you realize you're getting a really bad deal.
Absolutely. Guys, I must move on to the next issue, because I think it will also dominate the South African psyche, especially those of us who are in the gun owning world, and who view firearm ownership as a fundamental, as it really should be, even though it isn't in this country, but a fundamental right when it comes to defending one's life, liberty, and property rights. This week, the police management basically hauled over the coals by the Parliamentary Committee on Police. That's after the SAPS, that's South African Police Service Central Firearms Registry, came under the spotlight on Tuesday? They appeared before Parliament, forcing Parliament to suspend the meeting because they just appeared before the committee with shoddy statistics. Now, this meeting was scheduled to receive, the final stats on what has been the police program of the firearm amnesty. If you remember, there's been waves of it. The most recent one running from August last year and ending just at the end of February this year. And I raised this issue, and Tim, and I'll come to you first, Tim. I raised this issue because the CFR, that's the Central Firearms Registry, has been plagued by corruption, backlogs, poor administration, bad management, and of course, serious allegations, not even allegations, some proven cases, of criminal infiltration where they're, for example, selling guns to criminals and gangsters. What do you make of that? Again, a poor showing by the CFR before Parliament, Tim.
Oh, Shane, but we've got to give the guys slack, man. They all had COVID. Come on. No, it's been shocking.
Sihle had COVID and he didn't make it everyone else's problem.
Damn straight. No matter how angry the lefties became. Screw you, fatty.
They all thought you were tickets because you're fat. They
Damn
thought they
straight,
were-
man. That was the best part. That was the best part. But you digress. You digress.
There were a bunch of lefties in this country who were praying to a god they didn't know existed before this to say, please take Hitler. He's a major problem.
Homie, they were gnashing their teeth. Gnashing their teeth, unfortunately, if I bring it back on topic, much like how gun owners in this country have gnashed their teeth at the sheer frustration of, the Central Firearms Registry. This is a state-imposed law aimed at, controlling firearms, whatever that's meant to mean. But the organ that is then made responsible for this, Tim, absolutely shambolic, fundamentally corrupt to the core. I'm talking about actual senior police officers within that management structure that is currently facing charges before the courts. And of course, even cases of alleged hits on senior police officers who are investigating the corruption within this unit. I'm talking, of course, about the late Charles Kinnears, top cop here in the Western Cape. But I want you to just talk to me, Tim, from the perspective of, if I can mention it, but of course you're in your role as, you're here independently, excuse me. You're not here as part of GOSA, but I know you're part of the GOSA team. But these are issues you guys have been talking about for quite a while.
Oh, it's decades we've been going on about this sort of stuff, and it's just getting worse and worse. But again, it goes back to the previous topic we were talking about with Ace Magashule. Colonel Chris Prinsloo, who was a SAPS official, I don't even think he saw a day in a police cell. I think he was in protective custody the whole time. I don't know if Gideon will agree with me, but I don't think he actually saw the inside of a jail cell for very long, if not. But I mean, this guy is responsible for the death of something like 2,600 people with guns that were apparently traced back to what he gave out to Western Cape gangs.
That's crazy.
I've got on record certain ex-gang bosses reformed. They found Jesus, so they're now reformed. But they'll tell you that every 2 weeks there'll be a guy that comes in from the police, quite well known, and he will sell Z88s or amnesty firearms to Western Cape gangs in batches of 50 or 400 or 200. If one gang doesn't buy it, he goes on to the next one, and that's how they've been doing it for years. They're still doing it. In terms of the CFR being effective, they're going to crash and burn. And actually, do you know what? I hope they do. I hope they become so dysfunctional that they cannot process a letter of resignation. That's how bad it needs to become.
And Gideon, that is the frustration, again, that is shared, I must say this, almost uniformly across the gun-owning community in this country. Firstly, because of that recognition that, a firearm, for a lot of people, it's a life and death tool. That is the protection of their own lives against criminals who don't care about gun legislation or gun laws in this country. And yet here you have the police, who should be a partner, if you will, in the administration of this entire process, being absolutely shambolic and even corrupted, working with the very criminals.
Well, let me give you an example of how this works in a civilized country, and I'm going to use Namibia as my example. So if you want or need a firearm for self-defense in Namibia, you go to a local police station and you apply for the license with your local constabulary or whatever, their version of it is. And generally within 2 to 3 weeks, you will have the license approved and you can go fetch your gun, and that's the end of the story. In South Africa, where we are allegedly above these sorts of things, you as a woman, and I know several women that applied for self-defense licenses last year, September, June, July. Okay, so a good, I can't count so good, I'm like Jacob, but many months ago. Okay, they are still waiting for that license to be processed. The last time some of these applications were touched were in November last year. The president will come on the television and speak of the so-called second pandemic of gender-based violence. Now, if you look at the sheer volume of rape and assault, sexual assault perpetrated against women in this country, it's actually not a second pandemic. It is the real pandemic compared to COVID. And at the same time, they will deny women the right to protect themselves with firearms by just not processing the application timeously. The solution to this is obviously to implement a system of license the person, register the firearm, which is one of the campaigns I'm busy with. I can say absolutely nothing about the CFR's inefficiency and about police corruption because that would be redundant. It's all been said a million times over. The IRR has written extensive reports on the broken blue line that illustrate that the police are infiltrated and captured by criminals, and it's as opposed to the other way around. So there are solutions to this problem. That is the most infuriating part. There are practical, meaningful, cost-effective solutions that can be implemented tomorrow, but there is no political will, which infers to me that someone is benefiting largely from this dysfunctional system, or there's some other reason.
Absolutely. And guys, I must raise this, and I'll come to you, Gareth and Dumo, because I must bring this up. I'm looking at time, guys. There's a context behind this, guys. We live in an incredibly violent society. You know, South Africans are great people, but we are a violent society. And it's often that faith, flag, family, and freedom type society that I talk about, who are the ones looking to own firearms legally in order to protect those very things about us. Let me speak to this in the context of the recently released crime stats by the asshat himself, Ubheki Cele, you know, coming before this country and saying, you know what, guys, we had a great period where there was cops all over the streets because of the state of disaster and the lockdown. But unfortunately, I must come to you and say the results are bad. Serious crimes, contact crimes, up 26% if you compare this quarter to the previous one, that is October to December, from July to September, up 26%. Contact-related crimes up by 14%, property-related crimes up 3%, and of course, other serious crimes up 3%. Red almost across the board. Gareth?
Yeah, look, I'm a firearm owner. I actually applied for my amnesty in December last year, so I was just before the cutoff, and I managed to get a pile, I kid you not, a pile of documents that must have been the thickness of, I wouldn't quite say a Victor Hugo book, but I'd say, you know, any good novel. It was a huge pile of papers. I managed to get it in just in time. I handed in my gun. I'm very nervous about that, although they seem to have been quite jacked up at this particular police station. But I, you know, it just seems to me, like with tax, like with owning a car and paying insurance and doing all the right things and the things that you're required to do legally, the people who are doing the right things are punished, and the people who do illegal things seem to get away with it scot-free and don't incur any expenses along the way. I mean, it's much easier, as one of the comments here. Let me just see who it was. Keenan says, it's much easier to get a gun illegally in South Africa than legally. And I know that to be a fact. I haven't tried to buy an illegal gun, but it bothers me that, you know, the issue of women not being able to buy guns, or I mean, not just women, but it's a way for them to defend themselves against predatory men. I think that the way that that most South Africans see firearm ownership is not because they're gung-ho like, you know, a lot of Americans might be. It's purely because we absolutely know for sure that we cannot rely on the police. And if you are fortunate enough to live in a precinct where they run things properly, there are some police stations that, I've always said this, a lot of people become police because they want to do something in service. And many of our policemen and women are honest, good people. But they
Gareth, sorry,
Gareth.
Yeah. Your mic, man, is failing us here. It's very scratchy. So I'm going to give you a moment just to sort of tweak it and fiddle with it.
And I'm the broadcaster. How rude.
Oh, it's gone real bad. It's become worse, Gareth. But I'm going to give you a second just as I go to Dumo. But again, all of these points that are being raised by the rest of the panelists are absolutely spot on. And the comment that was made was, again, also very spot on. Dumo, I can take you to a certain section. I won't name the area because I know the criminals involved, which I know sounds terrible, but I can take you to sections where, you know, we can buy automatic rifles and the like, not even buy, sometimes even rent them at a relatively cheap rate, illegally, of course. But for the guy who wants to do it legally, because he wants to protect family, very difficult for one.
Right. And those people who want to do it legally, some of them, when they look at the cost of getting it legally, they actually think to themselves, well, if I get it legally, it's going to take so long. And if it takes really long, I don't have that. I can't really take a chance with that, with my family and so forth. So what are they going to do? They most likely are going to get it illegally. I mean, why go to the police? And I'm not saying people should take this path, but this is the decisions they have to make. Is that why should I go to the police station and wait for months and only to get a rejection when a guy across the road is saying, hey, bro, I can get you one like right now. And, you know, why should he reject that choice if it's easy for him to get it illegally? And also at the same time, I mean, I want to also emphasize, why isn't there any being research done on guns actually saving people's lives? I mean, there's a lot of research done in the United States showing how many crimes have been prevented as a result of competent gun ownership. No one wants to talk about that.
You know, is my microphone better now?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank God. I was very embarrassed. Just Terence's point is exactly in line with what Dumo's saying now, by the way, that he says we had 2020. I mean, this was a year when criminals had curfews to deal with. Alcohol and drugs were being consumed probably at an all-time low in modern South African history. Certainly, it was difficult to come by any of those things, cigarettes as well. So opportunistic criminals would have had a much more difficult time in 2020, and yet the criminal stats went up. This should be of great concern. Plus, we had the SANDF who were dispatched. We had police all over the place patrolling and arresting people for all of the lockdown regulations, which I'm sure we're all agreeing now look in hindsight to have been the most stupid reasons to arrest people, especially if crimes were on the app. So there's no plan. I mean, you look at Becky Tele, you don't get the impression that this is a person who genuinely feels like he can beat criminals. You get the impression that he's actually winking as soon as the cameras switch off, and winking and laughing with his friends who are involved in organized crime.
Absolutely. And Gareth, you raised a critically important point, one which I spoke of in a vlog I did this week, which is exactly that. An ordinary South African looking at someone like Becky Tele is not incentivized to believe that this man stands for, you know, the rule of law and law enforcement. If anything, he himself, as an image, just at an image level, dresses like a bloody 1960s gangster, 1950s, I should say, gangster. But Gideon, I must come back to you because, again, I want you to speak briefly on the campaign you're running. But before you do that, Gideon, as I'm looking at the time, guys, if you're watching, you're at the half-hour mark. This is Liberty and Friends, your Sunday evening news wrap-up show. I'm in conversation with Gareth Cliff, Dumo Denga, host of the Manpatria show, Tim Flack, of course, who is here on an independent basis, but he is part of the Gosa guys. Tim, wink, wink. And of course, last but not least, excuse me, Gideon Joubert of Paratus.Info. And this is Paratus. Gideon, again, to that point, you know, you're raising a critically important point around this reform that is needed in the space of gun ownership and actually including introducing, the idea of gun rights. It should be a right in this country to an extent, and how you do that should be in a smart policy. Please, can you just share again the initiative that you're driving at the moment?
Perfect. Just before I unpack that, and I'll do it briefly, comment on the crime stats. Becky Tele, almost all of SAPS management do not understand the very basic fundamentals of policing, the so-called Pelian principles.
Yes.
One of the principles which states you can only police a community with its consent.
That's right.
The other part of it is that police officers are just ordinary citizens that on a full-time basis have professionalized their concern with law and order, because it should be a society and civil-wide concern. They don't understand this. Centralized policing for a country of our size, with our diversity, cultural, linguistic, geographic, is foolhardy at best and just an absolute criminally incompetent mess at worst. And we should have federalized the system many, many years, if not decades ago. But that's a whole nother story.
If I can quickly just chip in there. I've got a very, very close family member that was very high up in the police. And they said that in recent years, the only way that SAPS believes that they can solve crime is by holding a meeting. And there's going to be officers out there right now laughing because they know it's very true. When crime goes up, they hold a meeting, and that's where it stops.
Absolutely. But again, it's the policy response at this point which is absolutely critically important. And, you know, Gideon, you've been banging this drum for quite a while. What do you actually mean by changing how the registration process happens. Can you just quickly talk us through that in 30
Very
seconds, please?
very briefly. We treat guns the same way we treat cars. You, as the individual, the natural person, become the licensed party. Your firearms are then registered to your name on an electronic database. If you are vetted as being a fit and proper to own a firearm, that is the end of it. Until such a time as that status changes due to you breaking a law and being found guilty, you remain a fit and proper person. So you go, if you need a gun for self-defense, you go to the gun store, you are biometrically identified to be who you are. The dealer is biometrically identified to be who they are. You transact, you buy the gun, it gets electronically placed on the registry under your name and approved. And then you leave the store either at that time or a short while later with your firearm, which is now in your legal possession. We can do this entire thing on a decentralized public ledger like a blockchain, which will make it even more transparent and even harder for corrupt individuals at the CFR to give illegitimate licenses to criminals and gangsters, because the system doesn't allow them to do this. And this entire thing can probably be built for far under R1 million. It's not going to be an expensive system or complicated.
But that's exactly why they don't want it, because if you can't make an expensive system, you can't cream some off the top for you and your friends. Again, if we built a really complex and expensive system, I think they'd be baying for it. but then we've got to come to terms with the fact, and I think that's such a great thing that you're doing there, Gideon. We've got to come to terms with the fact that this government does not want private firearm ownership. They want a monopoly of violence in the hands of the state. And unfortunately, there's going to be a minimum of collaboration and cooperation from the police at any stage of this for all of us who do want to abide by the law. I have never met more responsible people than the people who have to apply for firearm licenses. These people tick all the boxes. Most of them go and practice every week or at least once a month with their gun. They know how to disassemble it, load it, clean it. They know which ammo to use without even having to see it. They can feel it with their hands. These people are extremely conscientious people. If you wanted to find an index of the most responsible people in South Africa, you would have to look at the firearms license holders of this country, and you'd be sorted. They could also be the best and last hope for people who could actually restore order if things completely go pear-shaped. But now we're even stopping them from doing the thing that they need to do to protect their loved ones. It's ridiculous.
Absolutely. You make a very important point there, Gareth.
Jump in there. What Gareth said, I mean, Ghost has often said it, and Paul Oxley at Ghost has often said it, is that gun owners are the most law-abiding citizens in this country. Every single time government asks us to comply, we comply and we do what's required of us because we don't want to break the law. But we just get shafted at every corner, and they don't use any lube.
As the church folk who are watching this, I must apologize. I'm just kidding. Guys, I think you're all making critically important points here. And Dumo, I must come to you because, chap, I know we've had this conversation. In fact, we had it on an episode of Blacks Only a while back, where I made the argument that especially when you're someone who lives in a township, and your lived reality is that you are firstly severely under-policed. Let's begin that. Insofar as there being police resources that deal with those in your society that seek to affect or infringe on life, liberty, and property, you're under-resourced in that regard. And then secondly, there's the reality of you living in poorer neighborhoods. And again, I'm not necessarily suggesting that being poor automatically makes you a criminal, but just generally there's greater opportunity for crimes in those areas. You being the one who is dispossessed of what should be a right to own a firearm is almost a compounded situation given your circumstances. Whereas I would argue, and we've had this discussion and debate, that it's those sort of people we should be empowering and encouraging to become responsible armed self-defenders, because you're your own self-defender, aren't you?
Right. Agreed. I remember back in 2013 when the whole Oscar Pistorius debacle occurred. And then I had a discussion with a friend who lived in Soweto. And he was telling me that why we should need guns. And at that time, I was like anti-gun, cops should have guns and all that type of thing. And then what he told me, it actually changed my perception on guns at that moment. He said to me, look, you must understand where I live. Like, the cops aren't really that great. And sometimes, you're in a situation where If you don't have a gun, you probably would die. But if you do have one, you have an outlet that you can use to at least deter the criminal from doing any more damage to you, your family, and your property. And, after hearing that, I realized that, maybe I haven't been seeing this the right way. And so, people in the township, or even anyone for that matter, who's living in an area where they feel that, look, they need that outlet just in case a criminal does something crazy. They should have the right to protect themselves. And then also with women as well. I mean, women, they need it the most, in my opinion, because that equalizes the situation. If a predator comes in and they got a gun, they're good to go. So I think people need to understand, as I said earlier, that we need to look at how many crimes are prevented as a result of competent gun ownership. Then you will see a true picture, and then people may be open to the possibility of actually looking at competent gun ownership as a way to protect themselves.
Can I add something to?
Sorry, go ahead, Gideon.
I'll be
quick.
Before you do, can I just add a quick bookmark? And I want you to actually speak on this, Gideon. I for instance, Dumo raises the issue that for those who are the more vulnerable in our society, and I must lump in women insofar as the high rates of gender-based violence. I mean, this week the case of the woman who was murdered, left hung on a tree, and I believe her. Okay, I actually don't need to go into the graphic details, but a very graphic murder of this woman. And I'd done a vlog all the way back. I was actually livid at the time, and I said, one of the things that really frustrates me is that you have a lot of conversation in this country, especially from the feminist lot, around, we need to have workshops and committees, and politicians must have talk shops, and we need to train men in this and that. And I said, no, you can have that, yes, absolutely, but one of the things you should be doing is having a direct conversation around how do we empower the women themselves in this country to be their own self-defenders. For a woman in this country to be able to stand her ground and literally to spend justice in the moment to a would-be rapist or a would-be killer, or I would want to see more killers and rapists doing the dying than the women in this country. So,
or at least make them afraid enough to not try.
Absolutely.
I mean, if you thought there was a 50% chance that a woman that you were about to perform some indecent assault on had a weapon and you were a violent criminal, you'd think twice about it if it was possible that she was. The best argument, the most unassailable argument I've ever heard is a simple sentence. It is better to have a gun and not need one than to need a gun and not have one. There is no, I've never heard a good argument to the contrary. And again, you have to refer to the fact that legal firearm owners in this country are the most responsible people. They are not the people who are being arrested for shooting people or for doing bad things with their guns. More often than not, they are the most careful and will only use that gun at the most extreme circumstance imaginable. And therefore, it is a last resort. It's a weapon of last resort. But for people who don't have it, they must at some point realize, oh my God, I'm just going to have to go with whatever happens next. The criminal has complete control. That's not something I would wish on anybody I love. Even on people I don't particularly like, I wouldn't wish that upon them.
Absolutely. Gideon?
Yeah, so Gareth nails it. A rapist is a resource predator. This means that he wants to survive to enjoy his resource. He has no intention, like a terrorist or an active shooter or someone like that, to die for some specific cause in order to have an effect. So if you increase the opportunity cost of being a rapist by saying, well, you've got between 50 and 75% chance of getting shot and either grievously wounded and or killed in the perpetration of this resource predation, it becomes a lot less desirable, doesn't it? I mean, you might not necessarily reform the person into being a productive member of society, but you sure as heck don't make it a particularly lucrative as such activity. The second thing, just to add into Dumo's earlier point, there are no solid estimates pertaining to the amount of unlicensed firearms in circulation in South Africa. I deliberately refuse to use the term illegal firearm. There's no such thing as an illegal firearm. It's either illegally owned or unlicensed. Some of the estimates were up at the 5 million mark. I saw another estimate that was up to 16 million unlawfully own firearms in circulation in SA. There is no way in hell that 16 million firearms are in the hands of criminals. Instead, what in all likelihood has happened is we have 16 million odd people that cannot afford to comply with the expenses and the administrative process because English is not their mother tongue. The education system has failed us, so literacy and numeracy is an absolute fuck up in this country. And they are terrified of violent crime because they live in poor areas, either rural or in overcrowded townships, and they would rather run the risk of being arrested and prosecuted for unlawful possession of a gun than be completely defenseless against the Tsotsis in the area. So that's something we don't actually really talk about.
That's right. And you're absolutely spot on. I can speak to personal experience in that regard. I won't say anything more than that, except to bring it to Tim. Tim, you know, I know you have friends in the community, the gun owning community, including guys who own gun shops.
Yes.
You know, we've done that interview out in Somerset West. I just forgot the name of the shop. I'm sure they don't mind us shouting them out on the show.
That was Mark Mulder at Gunnery Arms.
That's right. That's right. And when we had a conversation, Tim, you had pointed out that actually ladies are some of the growing demographic of gun owners. Do you want to just quickly talk to that before I move us on?
I know, because it's Sunday, I don't want to come across as Billy Graham, but there's a light at the end of the tunnel. There's a massive light and a revival of people who want to own guns in this country, and it's incredible to see. I work in media on a daily basis when it comes to firearms, and the public opinion is swayed. And Adele Kirsten at Gun Free South Africa can eat her words as much as she likes. People want to buy guns to protect themselves. There are women of every color and people of every color in this country that are walking into gun shops on a daily basis, and they say to the guys at the back, "How do I get that one over there?" And and I want one for me. I want one for my wife. I can't afford that one right now, but do you have something that's going to be effective for me to defend myself with? I work in a gun shop on a Saturday morning, and I see the media requests coming in. I hear the questions that journalists are asking me. It's never happened so much as it is now in South Africa that people are more pro-firearm than they ever have been before.
Guys, I must move us on, but only to a section I like to call open mic, and that literally suggests exactly what you hear. You know, what are some of the other issues you've been looking at in the week? Maybe stuff that you want to be looking at, you know, in the week coming, which you think the viewers should be aware of. Speaking about the viewers, guys, we are at the 47-minute mark of the show, just 15 minutes left of the show. Please get your questions in. If you want to direct them at the guys, I'll pass them on, and please share and like this link. Guys, some of the things you maybe kept an eye on in the week, you want to quickly share with us?
Okay, I can start. Minimum wage has been increased. So we're expecting more unskilled laborers or unskilled job seekers to be left out of the market. And obviously this has been backed by empty moral platitudes by government officials saying that they want to reduce wage inequality. So I've got, so really if increasing the minimum wage is going to reduce wage inequality, then why don't we just make the minimum wage the president's salary and everyone is equal and no one's going to have a problem? So that's my question to those guys. And yeah, that's I think is a pertinent issue because, you know, jobs, people are losing them like there's no tomorrow because of lockdown. And now there's an extra barrier added, which is now the minimum wage, which is dangerous in my opinion.
Absolutely. It is quite a big issue. Gareth, I must come to you because I know you've spoken about this before. You know, often the people who promulgate these regulations, you know, of, minimum wage laws, they do it from a very altruistic line of argument. Oh, we're doing this because, you know, it's great for people and we're looking after the poor, they'll tell us. But the economic reality is very different. If you're an entrepreneur and, you know, the best you can do, for example, in the situation is offer 8 Rand an hour, and if the minimum wage is 15 Rand an hour, I can tell you now that poor chap who just wants a foot on the ladder would happily take that 8 Rand with the view of progressively growing their income, but they're just not allowed to.
Well, first of all, I would never use the word altruistic to describe any of our politicians. I'm afraid that's the worst moniker for them that I could possibly imagine. But you know, again, Dumo's spot on. I'm so glad he brought this up. We are. I've got to refer again to the fact that our finance minister is going to be addressing us in a couple of days' time, and he's going to be talking about all the spending. But unfortunately, when you talk about economics, and I'm no economics major, you know, I'm not someone is more or less au fait than any of you, for example. But none of the people who are supposed to be running our finances in this country seem to be any more qualified than me. And those who pretend to be they're very good at the spending side of the balance sheet, but they're not very good at understanding how money is generated. So when they say that minimum wage needs to be at a certain rate, Dumo's right. What's going to happen is we impoverish a whole lot of people. We force them to do really inhumane things like beg and pick up rubbish and things that they hope to then sell on those carts that they roll down the roads. You know, these are not jobs that we should be. Those people don't get a minimum wage. What kind of fantasy world do government live in when they think that that's how economies work? Those people will do whatever they have to, including sometimes steal and other things, because what you've done by making a minimum wage of, I think it's 4,000 Rand a month, is you've said to everyone who doesn't have skills that are more than 4,000 Rands worth, that they're okay, and everyone needs that. You must fend for yourself, which is pretty much the situation we've got anyway. So the minimum wage is completely made up. And, you know, if we're going to say 4,000 Rand, why not just say 200,000 Rand? Minimum wage is 200,000 Rand a month, and let's see what happens.
Absolutely. And Gideon, I want to come to you because there's some interesting comments coming through now. But Gareth did mention it, you know, the budget speech is coming up. I'm going to do a show on that this Wednesday. You know, some of the stuff that's already being sort of mooted and, you know, the chattering classes in the world of finance are projecting is, you know, talks of increased taxes are being mooted at the stage. And one asinine one is this notion that the state seeks to be pursuing, that it wants to tax those who are in the informal sector. How the hell does that work?
Thank you for saying that, because that was exactly what I was going to bring up. Gareth beat me to it. That Pilchard's man is talking to us this week to discuss, unfortunately, not his abysmal home cooking, but how he's going to cook the books to try and keep the public sector running. And that just jumped out at me, that they were proposing taxes on the informal sector. And I thought, I'm going to buy Tito a dictionary. I'm going to go in there with a highlighter and highlight these words that he keep using but clearly do not understand, because the very core premise of the informal sector is that it is informal. It has no formal structure. These people don't have accountants. They don't keep books. They don't charge VAT. A vast majority of them don't even have fucking banks account, for goodness sakes. They operate on a cash-only basis because that is the legacy that we live with in this country. And now these galaxy-brained individuals sitting in the fiscus decide, you know what, there's one stone out of which we haven't sucked enough blood, and it's the informal sector, which is the biggest sector in the economy outside the state. And the reason it's so big is a symptom of failure. A massive informal sector is not an achievement. It's not something to be proud of any more than having 20 million plus people on grants is an achievement. But yeah, I wait with bated breath to see what he's going to say to us this week.
Guys, you know, I'm watching some of the comments come through here.
Sorry, I think Tito's just he's gonna try and find another way to blame white people. He did that the other day in desperation. Which you know when ANC cadres who've been in power, and Tito's been part of the government. I mean, there was a hiatus where he wasn't very popular in the beginning of the Zuma era, but otherwise he was Minister of Labour under Mandela, so he's been around a long, long time. And for him, of all people, who was Minister of Labour, to say, oh, it's the whites at this point shows you how desperate things have become in the ANC. They've really run out of excuses.
I mean, it gets to that point, Tim, doesn't it? Where, you know, for the ordinary citizen, as we look to wrap up our conversation, guys, for the ordinary citizen, it's that frustration, isn't it, of, you know, there being a basket of actual ideas that are there. They're right in front of us. But there's seemingly a big disconnect and a growing gulf between the political elites in this country and the ordinary citizen.
No, it's definitely the case. It's becoming worse, and it's becoming more and more concerning. And at some stage, something's got to give, and we can't carry on like this anymore. It's at some stage we've got all of the people who've got some sort of brain and logic in this country have got to stand up and say this is ridiculous. We can't carry on like this.
Guys, I've effectively run out of time. I am going to give each of you the final word, please. Maybe share with us if you're a writer, what we can expect from you coming in the week. If you have your own show, what can we expect? Dumo, I'm going to begin with you. Brother, what can we expect on the Manpatria podcast?
Right. So every week I release 2 shows. The first one is called the Freeman series. That's released every Tuesday. And the Manpatria podcast, which is released every Thursday and Friday. So please head over to manpatria.com and you will see the schedules and the previous shows that we've had before.
Absolutely. I think I did tag that in the Facebook group. Guys, make sure you check that out. Subscribe, hit that like button. Tim, what can we expect from you this week, brother? What will you be keeping an eye out on?
Well, for one of my many hats is obviously working as a media officer for the gun lobby in South Africa, gun owners in South Africa. So I'm going to be heading up to Joubert on the 25th for a shooting event on the 28th that is specifically focused on women in Soweto learning how to shoot and operate a firearm and doing a basic introduction to firearms course. This was sort of brought about by one of the GOSA executive committee members, Themba Gubeka, and he did it thinking that there would be a small amount of people interested because he's got a passion for women in his area that he lives, and it ended up being an explosive event where it was just too many numbers for just one guy to handle, and he roped GOSA in, and the GOSA Girls on Fire with Lynette Oxley and the team of volunteers are going to be training women how to handle and use a firearm and how to get one for self-defense. And like I said, the comments coming in and the emails coming in on a daily basis from all over the country wanting this specific course for women is becoming a little bit overwhelming. There are a lot of people interested in this sort of stuff.
That sounds absolutely fantastic. You said it's this Thursday, the 25th.
I'll be going up on the 25th, and the event is on the 28th. And I believe the media houses are going to be there. ENCA is going to be there, and that sort of stuff. So.
I will tell you what, I will be there myself. I will get into my Baki Ufa Simba and drive up to Johannesburg to actually document that. That sounds absolutely fantastic. Tim, we'll stay in touch. Praji, Gareth, what can we expect from you this week, brother, including on the show?
Yeah, we've got the ENCA show on Wednesday. We've got a nice panel of people. We've always got international guests too. I'm getting some of the lefties on because I don't want, I don't want anyone to feel that the show is already one of those shows that's decided what its political slant on everything is. I might have my opinions, but the point of these things, as you've displayed on your own show, Sihle, and I'm sorry it's taken me so long to come on here. It isn't because I don't like you. It's because you haven't invited me. But we try we try to have as many points of view as we possibly can. And I'm speaking to some people in Washington who work for The Guardian. You don't get much more left than that, among other things. So we're doing that. The morning show is going right ahead, full steam, tomorrow 6 o'clock. And we do that every day for 2 hours on cliffcentral.com. So come and join us. If you haven't already got a full menu with Dumo and with Sihle, and I mean, Gideon, we got to get you on my show at some point, and you, Tim.
Absolutely.
Dumo, you also need to make a return. You need to come back at some point. It's time.
I would love to. But
thank you very much. And what a cool selection of comments here. I mean, I was just going through them during the course of the show. Such interesting points of view being shared here by people. So thank you for that. It's always good to see that there are smart people who are conscientious and care about liberty and freedom.
Absolutely. Shout out to the guests, man. And of course, last but not least, Gideon, what can we expect for you, brother, before I let you guys go?
I've got about 3 separate projects ongoing at the same time, none of which are public yet. But I will reveal them in time, and they are giving me sleepless nights. But and I'm a much better guest than a host when it comes to the show thing. But Gareth, thank you for the invite. I'll definitely accept. So instead of telling you what I'm going to do, I'll just leave it with a final thought. And I say, folks out there, thank you for tuning in. You are always the first responder to your personal emergency, and prepare yourself adequately and appropriately. mindset leads, training feeds, everything else, including equipment, follows, and you can put that on a bumper sticker.
Absolutely. Guys, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Super, super appreciate it. I am going to let you fellas go. And with that being said, thank you, dear viewer, for watching the show. As I try my level best to transition to my solo screen. It takes a little bit of a second. There we go. That's nearly there. A few more stragglers. Tim and Dumo, I see you guys straggling here. I'm going to try and get rid of you guys on the screen. And yeah, guys, thank you for watching the show. Really appreciate it. As always, you can support the show by doing two things, guys. Sharing these links and having your friends watch, please. You know, as many of your friends watch as possible, because I've always said the show is designed to arm people with the arguments, you know, that they can use in their own social settings, in their own communities, as we build that liberty-loving society, a faith, flag, family, and freedom type society. So please, please, please hit that share button, hit that like button. And of course, if you can, please support the show financially by becoming a contributor monthly on the show. You can do that from as little as 20 Rand per month, guys, on the various ways in which I've put on the screen. It is you who are allowing me to put diesel in my bakkie ufasimba to get around and to shoot these episodes as I now look to get back onto the streets talking to you, the South African, and the BDL show being on the street. So guys, very interesting shows coming, and you heard already that I'll be in Johannesburg, currently in Cape Town, but we'll be traveling up to Johannesburg in the next day or two. Guys, thank you so much for watching. And this has been another episode of Liberty and Friends. A reminder, as I always say at the end of a show, that you should never trust a commie.